The Kyle Rittenhouse trial continues. Yesterday, the prosecution, now this is the prosecution, okay, remember that. They had Richie McGinnis on the stand. He's a Daily Caller reporter who witnessed and filmed what happened that night. There were not a lot of, if we recall, during this in Kenosha and the riots all across the country in 2020, there were plenty of mainstream media reporters on the scene, but they didn't see a lot of the violence and chaos going on because they were focused entirely on the police. But Richie McGinnis is one of the reporters, one of the real reporter on the scene, capturing what was happening, and he was a witness to what happened with Kyle Rittenhouse. And so he was called in by the prosecution. And once again, keep in mind, this is the prosecution's witness. And let's hear first. I think we have a couple of clips from him. He says first, we'll play clip number 2, where he talks about the sequence of events and what led up to it. Here it is.
The sequence of the folks that were involved in this running, as we've seen in many other videos, is Mr. Rittenhouse is in front, Mr. Rosenbaum is running after him, and you are behind Mr. Rosenbaum. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
How far back from Mr. Rosenbaum were you as the pursuit went through the Car Source parking lot?
Well, it's hard to say because I kind of caught up to them. I was running a bit faster, and so at the time initially I was probably 30 feet back when everybody first started running, but then by the time I arrived in the lot, I was 15 feet.
And you continued to be behind Mr. Rosenbaum at the time that the defendant shot and killed him, correct?
I did alter my trajectory a little bit when I saw Mr. Rittenhouse turn around and saw Mr. Rosenbaum lunging for the front portion of the rifle.
Okay. Let me stop you there for a second.
Yeah, I bet you want to stop him there. So Rosenbaum, the victim, quote unquote, this is the man that the prosecution wants to portray as the victim. You have your own witness on the stand saying that the quote unquote victim lunged for the rifle of Kyle Rittenhouse. The defense has not even presented its case yet. And already the prosecution case has fallen apart. And it got worse from there. There was this moment, which was a dagger for the prosecution, only that they're stabbing themselves. Okay, this is them stabbing themselves with the dagger. And here, just watch this exchange. It's pretty incredible.
And you've already established that after the shooting, Mr. Rosenbaum never says a word, correct?
Correct.
You don't know, as you sit here today, what Mr. Rosenbaum was thinking, do you?
You mean at the time of the shooting?
Yes. Or at any point in his life. I mean, you have no idea what Mr. Rosenbaum was ever thinking at any point in his life. You have never been inside his head. You never met him before. You don't know.
I've never exchanged words with him, if that's what your question is.
So your interpretation of what he was trying to do or what he was intending to do or anything along those lines is complete guesswork, isn't it?
Well, he said, "F you," and then he reached for the weapon.
Okay. Let's talk about that.
My God, that is one of those. That's like one of those moments that you see in a trial in a TV show or a movie. The only thing you would add in if this was in a movie, then there would have been gasps and everything in the among the people there in the courtroom to add a little bit of dramatic flair into it. But it is a gasp moment where your case just falls apart on the stand. So you have the quote-unquote victim saying out loud, stating his violent intentions out loud. You have him lunging for the weapon. And I have to keep emphasizing that these are the witnesses the prosecution is bringing up. We haven't even heard from the defense's witnesses yet. There's simply no case here. We have video evidence, which should put an end to it right there because we can all see what happened. Certainly we had one of the shootings on video, and you could very clearly see that Kyle Rittenhouse is on the ground, and then he's got this mob of violent people who are about to pounce on him. And then we had most of the other shooting on the video, and then we find out later that the feds had the rest of that video. They didn't tell us about it, and we didn't see it until right now. And on top of the video evidence, we also now have eyewitnesses, the prosecution's eyewitnesses, the state's eyewitnesses, who are painting a picture of events that entirely vindicates Kyle Rittenhouse. So when you see this, and you listen to what these witnesses have to say, and you watch the video, and you listen to the state's opening arguments and everything that they presented before the trial and during the trial so far, and you see that they just have no case at all against this guy. There is nothing there. Now, does that mean that Rittenhouse will actually walk? No, because you never know what a jury will do. And all it really takes is one Antifa sympathizer on that jury, which there could very easily be, or more than one. It only takes one BLM sympathizer. There could very easily be one or more than one. But chances are, Kyle Rittenhouse, certainly he deserves to walk, and I would say chances are that he actually does. You know, because this is so incontrovertible, it's so unavoidable. The facts are right there. As far as self-defense claims go, this is about as straightforward and simple as it gets. There are times when self-defense claims are a little bit more complicated. There can obviously be gray areas in situations like this, but here there is not. And that's why all along, the people who are calling for Kyle Rittenhouse's head, they're not really talking about the shootings themselves. What you hear, and this is including the prosecution's case, what they keep going back to, and certainly what you hear online all the time with the outrage mob online saying Kyle Rittenhouse should be in jail, he should be executed, all these things. You know, people who are otherwise are very much opposed to, supposedly opposed to the death penalty, but in this case they'll make an exception for Kyle Rittenhouse because he's white. But what they keep saying is, well, he shouldn't have been there to begin with. He crossed state lines. So what? What difference does that make? So you cross state lines and now you don't have a right to self-defense anymore? I live in Tennessee. If I go to Virginia and someone tries to kill me, I can't shoot them because I crossed state lines? Coming, by the way, from people who don't care about lines. They say that lines are borders, boundaries. These are imaginary boundaries. They say there's no significance to the boundary separating the United States from Mexico. And anybody who lives south of our southern border, they have every right to come here and enjoy all of the freedoms and liberties and entitlements that we enjoy as American citizens, including the right to vote. And now even we're going to be paying, giving out $450,000 checks from the Biden administration to these immigrants as well. So they'll say that's fine because the border is imaginary. And yet the border separating one state from another is this magical boundary. And once you cross it, if you don't belong to that state, you have no right to self-defense. That's the claim. Well, of course, that's the claim for people who have no principles whatsoever. They feel no need to be honest. They feel no obligation to the truth whatsoever. And then as far as him, he wasn't supposed to be there. Nobody was supposed to be there. Like none of the events in Kenosha that night should have been occurring. You had mobs of people burning down the city. None of that should have been happening. So at worst, you would say Kyle Rittenhouse, just like the other 50,000 people, shouldn't have been there. Rosenbaum, the victim, shouldn't have been there. That's at worst. Like that's the worst thing you could say about Kyle Rittenhouse. But I wouldn't even really agree with that. because he worked in Kenosha. So that was his community as well. As someone who spent a lot of time there. He was helping to clean up graffiti earlier in the day. He actually cared about the community. And he felt an obligation to go there and do what law enforcement would not do. And when law enforcement refuses to do its job, or is not allowed to do its job, or some combination of the two, then you're going to have some citizens who feel called to step in and fill that gap. And that's what Kyle Rittenhouse did. But whether he should or should not have done that, whether he should or should not have been there, whatever that means, he still has a basic right to self-defense. And that's very clear. So then you have to start asking yourself, considering that there's no case at all here, and the state knows that they have no case. Okay, they're not crazy. They know there's no case here. There's a reason why they had to bring Richie McGinnis up, because they don't have anybody else. So then you really have to ask, what are they trying to achieve here? You have to start asking yourself, do they want more riots? Is that what this is about? Because you're going to get them. Once he's exonerated, which he probably will be, you're going to have mass riots again in Kenosha. Antifa and BLM, they've already promised that. They've stated that ahead of time. If you don't convict this guy, we're going to riot. They are trying to coax a guilty verdict, just like they did with Derek Chauvin, by threatening violence and implicitly threatening it against the jurors as well if they don't get what they want. Implicitly and also, in some cases, explicitly. So is that the point in the end? The powers that be here, do they want more riots and more chaos in the streets? You really have to start wondering about that. I mean, you could also theorize the other way and say that they're trying to appease the mob, and that's the reason they arrested and charged them to begin with. But they would also have to know that this appeasement is very temporary. I mean, there would have been additional rioting had they never charged him at all. But that would have all happened back last summer when they were rioting anyway. So they could have said right then, look, there's no case here. This is self-defense. We're not going to charge him. The left would have been very upset about it. There would have been, it would have put some more literal fuel on the fire, but it's a fire that was already burning at that point. And we would have all long since moved on by now. Now what you've guaranteed once he's exonerated is that you're going to have mass rioting along the lines of what we saw last summer, if not worse. Is that the intention? Is that what they actually want? Again, you have to really wonder. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with all your friends.